At my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law demanded I hand over the keys to my ranch in front of 200 people. When I refused, he slapped me so hard I almost hit the floor. I stumbled out of the hall and dialed a number. He went crazy when he saw who I called. I'm glad you're here. Stick with me to the end of this story, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I never imagined my daughter's wedding day would end with me bleeding on the marble floor of the reception hall, but that's exactly what happened when Alan's mask came off in front of all our guests. The day had started like any father's dream. Avery looked radiant in the antique lace dress that belonged to her grandmother, the same one my late wife, Mariana, wore 32 years ago. I walked her down the aisle of St. Michael's Church, tears welling in my eyes as she squeezed my arm and whispered how she wished her mom could see her. For a moment, everything felt perfect. For a moment, I forgot the growing unease Alan had been causing me for months. The ceremony was beautiful. Avery was glowing with happiness, and I forced myself to smile every time Alan looked my way. He had this rehearsed charm that fooled everyone, except those who looked close enough. I had learned to look closely over the past 2 years, ever since he started asking very specific questions about the ranch's land, my will, and what would happen to the property when I was gone. But weddings bring out people's true nature, and Alan's mask began to slip during the cocktail hour. I was near the bar, a whiskey in my hand, watching Avery laugh with her college friends, when Alan came up beside me. His bow tie was loose, his face flushed from champagne, and his eyes had a different look. Harder. "Richard," he said, clapping me on the shoulder a little too forcefully. "We need to talk." I turned to face him, noticing how a few conversations around us died down. "What is it, son?" The word son seemed to annoy him. He clenched his jaw before forcing another smile. "About the ranch. About Avery's future. Our future. This is neither the time nor the place, Alan." I lowered my voice, trying to de-escalate whatever was brewing. "It's your wedding day. Enjoy it." But Alan had other plans. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than a shout. "Actually, it's the perfect time, with all these witnesses here. All these important people from both families." A chill went down my spine. The way he said witnesses turned my stomach. I glanced around and realized we were surrounded by his business partners, his relatives, people I barely knew. Avery was still across the room, laughing, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Alan, whatever you're thinking, I think," he interrupted, raising his voice just enough for others to hear, "that it's time to show some generosity, to provide real family support." That's when I saw it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. For a second, I thought it was another wedding gift. But when he opened it, my blood ran cold. Inside was a set of keys. My keys. The keys to the ranch house. The barn. The tool shed. Keys I definitely had not given him. "How did you get those?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Alan's smile turned predatory. "Avery made copies." She thought it would be a nice surprise, a symbolic gesture. He held the box higher, making sure the people around us could see. "But I think we need the originals, don't you? Along with the deed to the property." The whiskey glass trembled in my hand from rage. "The what? Come on, Richard, don't play dumb." His voice was so loud now that all conversation around us stopped completely. "Avery is your only daughter. The ranch should be hers. It should be ours. And frankly, a man your age shouldn't have to carry such a big responsibility all alone." I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on us. The music had stopped. Even the waiters froze. Alan had planned this perfectly, creating a public spectacle where any refusal on my part would make me look selfish and irrational. "The ranch isn't going anywhere," I said carefully. "And this is not a conversation for when? When you're dead?" Alan's mask fell off completely. "Avery deserves security now. We both do. And that ranch is just sitting there, wasted on an old man who can barely manage it." The insult was like a physical blow. Several guests gasped. I saw Avery's Aunt Martha put a hand to her mouth in horror. Across the room, I saw Avery had finally noticed the commotion and was walking towards us, her dress flowing behind her, her face a mask of confusion. I said no, Alan. My voice was firmer than I felt. And I meant it. That's when everything changed. Alan's face twisted with fury, all pretense of civility gone. He stepped towards me, his breath thick with champagne and rage. "You stubborn, stupid old fool. Do you have any idea who you're messing with?" Before I could answer, before I could step back, before anyone could intervene, Alan's hand swung across my face. The slap echoed through the reception hall like a gunshot. The blow was so powerful, it knocked me off balance. My left foot slipped on the polished marble, and I went down hard, hitting my hip first, then my shoulder. A sharp pain exploded through my body as I lay there, stunned, the taste of blood filling my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue. For a moment there was absolute silence, then the murmurs started rising like a wave. He hit him. "Oh my God, did you see that? Someone call security." I pushed myself up onto an elbow, looking at the shocked faces around me. Alan stood over me, breathing heavily, his fists still clenched. He looked bewildered, as if even he couldn't believe what he'd just done. Then I saw her. Avery was at the edge of the crowd, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. But she wasn't moving closer. She wasn't coming to help her father, who had just been assaulted at her wedding. She was looking at Alan with an expression that looked like fear. In that moment, I knew this wasn't the first time she had seen this side of him. With effort and pain, I got to my feet. My hips screamed in protest, and I could feel a bruise swelling on my cheekbone, but I stood tall. I looked him straight in the eye, then let my gaze sweep over the crowd of guests, many of whom I had known for decades. "I believe," I said, my voice quiet but clear in the silent room, "this reception is over." I turned and walked towards the exit, each step sending a jolt of pain up my leg. Behind me, I heard Alan's voice, now high-pitched and desperate. "Richard, wait. I didn't mean it. It was... We can fix this." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just walked out of the reception hall, out of the hotel, and into the parking lot where my truck was waiting. Inside the cab, I pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking, but I managed to find the contact I was looking for. It rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice answered. "Richard, how was the wedding?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I was about to unleash. "Robert, I need you to come to Denver tonight. It's time." There was a pause. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." I looked back at the hotel, where shadows still moved behind the brightly lit windows of the ballroom. Somewhere in there my daughter was crying. Somewhere Alan was probably trying to justify what happened. And in that same place, the life I had built for the last 25 years was falling apart. "I'm sure," I replied. "It's time everyone knew the truth about the ranch." As I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror. Alan was at the hotel entrance, talking frantically on his phone, his face pale with shock. He had no idea what was coming, but he was about to find out. The drive to the ranch gave me too much time to think about how we got here. 25 miles of dark highway stretched before me, and with every mile, the memories came flooding back. Not the good ones of Avery's childhood, but the memories of the slow, calculated poisoning of our relationship, orchestrated by Alan over the past 2 years. It started small, as these things always do. Subtle comments that, at first, seemed harmless. "Dad seems really tired lately," Avery would say during our Sunday dinners. "Maybe he's working too hard at the ranch." At first, I thought it was genuine concern. At 68, my body didn't respond the way it used to, and maintaining 800 acres of cattle was no easy task. But then the comments became more frequent, more pointed. "Alan thinks you should consider hiring more help," she mentioned one evening as we watched the sunset from the porch. "He's worried about you managing everything alone." Alan, who had never set foot on a ranch before he met my daughter. Alan, who wore designer suits to family barbecues and complained about the dust. Alan was worried about me. The real manipulation began about 18 months ago, right after Alan proposed. Suddenly, every conversation with Avery included his opinions, his concerns, his suggestions. He was always the sensible one, the practical one, the one looking out for everyone's best interests. "Alan says it's not fair that I don't have any legal claim to the ranch," Avery told me one day, her tone measured. "He says most fathers would have already started the transfer process." I remember the bitter taste of my coffee that morning, and the tightness in my chest, something I didn't yet have a name for. Transfer process? You know, putting the property in my name, for tax reasons. Alan has been doing some research. He says we could save thousands in inheritance taxes if we plan ahead. Alan again. Always. Alan, with his research, his plans, his convenient solutions to problems I didn't even know I had. The hardest part was watching my daughter change. Avery had always been independent, with her mother's strong will. She'd worked on the ranch during summers, knew every fence line, every water trough. But slowly, Alan's voice started coming out of her mouth. "Dad, you're being stubborn about the ranch," she said during one particularly tense dinner. Alan just wants to help. He has experience in property management. Property management, as if the Double C Ranch was just another piece of real estate. As if the land my grandfather homesteaded in 1923 was just an asset to be optimized. What kind of experience? I asked, though I already knew the answer would disappoint me. He manages several commercial properties in Denver. He knows about land values, market trends, that sort of thing. That sort of thing. Not the kind that involved waking up at 4:30 a.m. to check on pregnant cows. Not the kind that required mending fences in 100-degree heat or staying up all night during a drought, praying the wells wouldn't run dry. The pressure mounted after they got engaged. Alan started showing up uninvited, usually when Avery wasn't around. He would walk the property with his phone out, taking pictures, asking questions about acreage and mineral rights. With that rehearsed smile, he would claim he was just curious, trying to understand Avery's roots. But it wasn't her family history he was sizing up. One afternoon, I caught him by the barn on the phone with someone, discussing land comps and development potential. When he saw me approach, he hung up immediately. "Work call," he said. "You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I had never made a business call in someone else's barn without permission. The lies started small. Alan would tell Avery I had agreed to things I never had, said words I never spoke. Dad told Alan he's ready to start handing over the reins. Avery told me one Sunday, "He's excited to have you take on more." I stared at my daughter across the table, trying to see if she knew it wasn't true. But she believed him. She wanted to believe him. "When did I say that?" I asked cautiously. "Last week when you two were talking by the south pasture. Alan said you seemed relieved to have someone to share the load with." I remembered that conversation. Alan had cornered me while I was checking a fence, asking pointed questions about profit margins and operating costs. I gave him short answers and left as soon as I could. Apparently, he took my politeness as enthusiasm. From there, the gaslighting intensified. According to Alan, I was forgetting things I'd said, agreeing to decisions I never approved. Avery started looking at me with concern, as if I were suddenly becoming forgetful, unstable. "Are you feeling okay, Dad?" she asked one night, after Alan claimed I had promised to show him the property blueprints. "You seem a little confused lately." Confused? That's what Alan wanted her to think. That her father was losing his mind, that he was a liability, maybe even a danger to himself. But the truth was, I was sharper than I had been in years. I started paying attention to every word Alan said, every claim, every story. I started taking notes, logging his lies, and I started making my own calls. The first was to my lawyer, James Mendoza, who had handled my affairs for 2 decades. "Has anyone contacted you about transferring the ranch property?" I asked him. "No, Richard. Should they have?" Alan Renteria, Avery's fiancé, has been telling her that it's standard practice for tax purposes. There was a long silence. "Richard, you know the situation with the ranch." "That's not exactly correct. I knew the situation. I had known it for 25 years. But Alan didn't know it, and neither did Avery. I had carried that secret since Mariana died, protecting my daughter from a truth that would have only complicated her life. "I think it's time to start making some calls, James. Are you sure?" "Once you start this process, I'm sure." The second call was more difficult. Robert Carter had been my contact for 5 years. We spoke quarterly, and he handled the financial side of my position. He was surprised to hear from me outside our usual schedule. "Everything okay, Richard?" "I think it's time we talked about the agreement," I said. "My daughter is marrying someone who doesn't understand the situation. That's a big step." "Are you absolutely sure?" I thought of Alan's hands on my daughter, his voice in her ear, his plans for land that wasn't mine to give. "I am absolutely sure." The third call was the hardest. Dr. Patricia Miller had been our family doctor for 15 years. She delivered Avery, held Mariana's hand through her cancer treatment, and saw me through the darkest days of my life. "Patricia, I need you to do something for me. I need a full medical evaluation, both physical and cognitive. Richard, you just had your annual checkup 3 months ago. Everything was perfect. I know, but I need it on the record. A document stating that I am of sound mind and in good physical condition." There was a pause. "Is someone suggesting you're not?" I told her carefully what was happening, how Alan was trying to paint me as confused, forgetful, unable to manage my own affairs, how Avery was starting to doubt me. "That son of a bitch," Patricia said, her professionalism slipping. "Pardon my language, But that is emotional abuse. Textbook gaslighting. Can you help me? I'll do you one better. I will run every test in the book. Blood work, cognitive tests, physical capability assessments. When we're done, you'll have a report that proves you're sharper than most 40-year-olds. The results were just as she predicted. Perfect blood pressure, excellent cognitive function, physical fitness well above average for my age group. I stored the medical reports in my safe, along with other documents that would soon become very important. But I made one mistake during those months of preparation. I underestimated just how far Alan would go to get what he wanted. I thought he would continue to apply pressure slowly, wearing me down with patience. I thought he would continue his psychological campaign, slowly convincing Avery that her father was no longer reliable. I never imagined he would try to publicly humiliate me at his own wedding. I never thought he would go so far as to demand the keys to the ranch in front of 200 people, and I certainly never thought he would hit me. That slap changed everything. It moved my timeline up by months and forced my hand. Maybe it was for the best. Maybe it was time Alan learned that some secrets are worth keeping, and some lies have consequences he could never possibly imagine. As I pulled onto the ranch road, my phone lit up with missed calls. Avery, probably. Maybe Alan. Certainly people who witnessed what happened at the reception and wanted to know what would happen next. But there was only one call I wanted to make. I dialed Robert's number again as I sat in my truck, looking out over the land I had protected for 25 years. Robert, it's Richard again. How soon can you get the board members together in Denver? If it's urgent, I can have them here by morning. I touched my swollen cheek and felt the ache in my hip where I hit the marble floor. It's urgent! Alan Renteria just made the biggest mistake of his life. It's time he learned who really owns the Double C Ranch. The truth about the ranch began 25 years ago, on the worst day of my life. Mariana had been battling cancer for 18 months, and we had spent our life savings on treatments that ultimately failed to save her. I was sitting in the hospital billing office, looking at invoices totaling over $300,000, when my ranch foreman found me. Mr. Valverde, he said, holding his hat in his hands. I hate to bother you at a time like this, but we have a problem. The problem was a drought, the worst in 50 years. Our cattle were dying, the wells were running dry, and we had no money to drill new ones. The bank was already circling, talking about foreclosure. Mariana was gone. Avery was only 7. And I was about to lose everything my family had built since 1923. That's when Robert Carter knocked on my door. I'll never forget that evening. I was on the porch, watching the sun set over land that might soon not be mine, when a black sedan drove up the road. A man in an expensive suit got out, a leather briefcase in his hand and the confident look of someone who handles a lot of money. Mr. Valverde, I'm Robert Carter. I represent the Meridian Investment Consortium. I understand you might be interested in a business arrangement. I didn't have the energy to be polite. If you're here to make a ridiculous offer for my ranch, let's not waste our time. Actually, he said, settling into the porch chair next to me uninvited, I'm here to offer you something very different, a chance to keep your ranch and solve your financial problems. Forever. He opened his briefcase and took out a thick contract. Meridian specializes in agricultural conservation. We buy ranches and farms from families in crisis, then lease them back to the original owners to manage. You keep your home, your job, your legacy. We handle the finances. I was skeptical. What's the catch? No catch. You become the manager of our ranch. We pay you a generous salary, cover all operating expenses, and handle any capital improvements. From the outside, nothing changes. You'll still be Richard Valverde running the Valverde Ranch, but legally the property will belong to Meridian. For how long? As long as you want. As long as you wish to uphold the agreement. When you decide to retire, we'll work out a transition plan. If you ever want to buy the property back, we will negotiate fair terms based on the market value at that time. I stared at the contract, my head spinning. Why would you do this? What's in it for you? Robert smiled. Meridian is not your typical investment group, Mr. Valverde. We represent very wealthy individuals who believe in preserving America's agricultural heritage. They don't need immediate profits. They think long-term. Who are these people? That's confidential. But I can tell you they are patriots who understand that family ranches like yours are the backbone of this country. They would rather see them preserved and well-managed than carved up and sold to developers. The offer seemed too good to be true. A salary of $90,000 a year, plus full benefits. All ranch expenses covered, full autonomy in day-to-day operations, and most importantly, Avery would inherit my position when I was gone, with the option to eventually buy back the land. I need to think about it. Of course. But Mr. Valverde, the bank is planning to begin foreclosure proceedings next week. This offer expires in 48 hours. I signed the contract that night. What other choice did I have? I was drowning, and Meridian had thrown me a life raft. The next morning, trucks with drilling equipment arrived. Within a week, we had 3 new wells pumping clean water. Within a month, the cattle were healthy again. And within 6 months, the ranch was more profitable than it had ever been under my ownership. For 25 years, the arrangement worked perfectly. Meridian sent quarterly checks, covered all major expenses, and never interfered with my decisions. Robert visited 4 times a year, always polite and supportive. I was the manager, but to everyone else I was still the owner. Even Avery believed the ranch belonged to me. I had planned to tell her the truth when she turned 21, but by then she was in college, focused on her studies and her social life. When she graduated, she moved to Denver for her career. The ranch wasn't part of her immediate plans, so I kept putting off the conversation. Then Alan came along, and everything changed. The first time he set foot on the ranch, he walked around like he was conducting an appraisal. He asked direct questions about acreage, mineral rights, and property values. He wanted to see property records, tax assessments, and profit reports. Just trying to understand Avery's heritage, he explained, when I caught him taking pictures of the equipment. But his questions were too precise, too calculated. This wasn't just curiosity about Avery's future. He was planning something. That week, I called Robert. We have a potential problem. What kind of problem? Avery's boyfriend is asking a lot of questions about the ranch. He wants information I can't give him without revealing the agreement. How serious are they? Serious enough that he's talking about marriage. There was a long pause. Richard, you know the terms of the contract. If any outside party discovers the true ownership structure, Meridian has the right to terminate the agreement immediately. I knew. I had read that clause dozens of times over the years. It was Meridian's way of protecting themselves from public scandal or legal entanglements. If word got out that wealthy investors were secretly buying up family ranches, it would create a political firestorm they wanted to avoid at all costs. What are my options? Tell your daughter the truth. If she's planning to marry this man, she needs to know what she's really inheriting. But every time I tried to talk to Avery, Alan managed to steer the conversation, ask his own questions, draw his own conclusions. He assumed the ranch was a valuable asset that would one day belong to Avery. He assumed I was a wealthy landowner who could afford to be generous with wedding gifts and financial support. He had no idea I was little more than a well-paid manager caretaking someone else's investment. The pressure increased after they got engaged. Alan started talking about the improvements he wanted to make, the changes he envisioned for the property. He talked about subdividing pastures, building recreational facilities, even selling off parcels for residential development. This place has incredible potential, he told me one afternoon, standing on a hilltop overlooking the main house. With the right marketing strategy, we could turn this into a destination ranch. Weddings, corporate retreats, that sort of thing. My blood ran cold. The contract with Meridian explicitly forbade any commercial development without board approval. Alan was planning to turn a working cattle ranch into a tourist trap. That's not really my vision for this place, I said cautiously. Well, it won't be your decision for much longer, will it? He smiled, but his voice had an edge. Once Avery and I are married, we'll be the ones making the decisions. That's when I understood. Alan wasn't just planning to inherit the ranch. He was planning to take it over while I was still breathing. He was maneuvering to push me out, to convince Avery I was too old and stubborn to manage the property effectively. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every demand, every lie he told Avery about things I had supposedly agreed to. I also started preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. The medical evaluation was just the first step. I had my lawyer compile a complete dossier on Alan Renteria, his credit history, his business dealings, his past relationships. What we found was disturbing. Alan had a pattern of targeting women with assets. His first marriage ended when his wife discovered he had been secretly taking out mortgages on property she had inherited. His business partnerships consistently failed, leaving his partners with the debt while he walked away. But the most damaging information came from his current job. Alan was under investigation for filing questionable expense reports and using company resources without authorization. He was likely to be fired within the next 6 months. He was desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. I should have told Avery everything before the wedding. I should have sat her down and explained it all, from the Meridian contract to Alan's financial troubles, but I kept hoping she would see through his manipulations on her own. I kept believing that my smart, independent daughter would see what was happening. Instead, Alan forced the issue with public humiliation and physical violence. He forced my hand in the worst possible way, in front of the worst possible audience. Now, sitting in my truck at the entrance to the ranch, I knew there was no turning back. Tomorrow morning, Robert would arrive with the board of Meridian. Alan would discover that he had just assaulted the manager of a ranch owned by some very powerful people. People who did not tolerate threats to their investments or attacks on their personnel. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Alan's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Richard, look, I know things got out of hand tonight. I was stressed, maybe had too much champagne. But we're family now, and family works things out. Call me. We need to talk about how to move forward. Move forward. As if slapping me in front of 200 witnesses was just a minor hiccup in our relationship, as if tomorrow would be business as usual. Alan had no idea what was coming, but in about 12 hours, he was going to get a lesson on the difference between appearing to own something and actually owning it. And more importantly, he was going to learn that some people have friends in very high places. I was up before dawn, just like always, but this morning everything felt different. Every sound was sharper, the coffee maker gurgling, my boots on the hardwood floor, the distant lowing of cattle in the east pasture. Today was the day Alan Renteria would find out that some secrets have consequences. Robert called at 6:15. We're an hour out from the ranch. The board members flew in from New York, Chicago, and Houston. They weren't happy about being pulled from their schedules, but when I explained what was happening, they agreed it required immediate attention. How much should I tell them about Alan? Everything. They need to understand the full scope of the threat we're facing. I spent the next hour preparing. I gathered all my documentation, the medical reports proving my sound mind, the legal workup on Alan's character and finances, the recordings of our conversations over the past year. Everything needed to paint a complete picture. At 7:30, 3 black SUVs came up the ranch road, kicking up dust in the morning Sunday. I watched from the kitchen window as 6 people got out, all dressed in formal business attire that looked out of place against the backdrop of pasture land and mesquite trees. Robert led the way, looking just as he had 25 years ago. Beside him walked a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and an air of authority that said she was used to being the smartest person in the room. The others were men in their 50s and 60s, with the quiet confidence of real power. Richard, Robert said as he approached, I'd like you to meet the board of Meridian. Eleanor Vance, our chairwoman. James Mendoza, chief financial officer. David Chen, legal counsel. Thomas Davis, director of operations. And Patricia Warren, head of risk management. I shook their hands one by one, noting the firm grips and direct gazes. These were not people who wasted time on pleasantries. Mr. Valverde, Eleanor Vance said, her voice crisp and professional. Robert has briefed us on the situation. We understand you were threatened and physically assaulted by an individual attempting to take control of this property. That's correct. And this individual believes you are the sole owner of the ranch? He does. He and my daughter both. I've maintained that pretense for 25 years, as required by the contract. David Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. We've been doing our own research on Alan Renteria since Robert's call yesterday. What we've found is troubling. He turned the tablet to me, showing a detailed financial profile. Mr. Renteria is in significant debt. Credit cards, personal loans, and apparently some gambling debts to less than reputable people. He owes roughly $150,000 to various creditors. Eleanor Vance spoke again. More concerning is his employment situation. Our contacts at his company confirmed he's under investigation for embezzlement. He's been using corporate credit cards for personal expenses and billing clients for work that was never done. They're planning to fire him next week, Patricia Warren added. He likely suspects it, which explains his desperation to secure assets through marriage. A sick knot formed in my stomach. Does Avery know any of this? We doubt it, said Thomas Davis. Renteria has been very careful to project an image of success. Fancy car, nice apartment, designer clothes, all bought on credit he can't afford. James Mendoza looked at his own tablet. The psychological profile is a perfect match for predatory behavior. He targets women with assets, uses manipulation and emotional abuse to gain control, and then systematically strips them of their wealth. His first wife lost her family's jewelry business to his debts, David Chen continued. His second serious relationship ended when the woman discovered he'd forged her signature on loan documents using her house as collateral. The picture was becoming clearer and uglier. Alan wasn't just an opportunist. He was a professional con man who had found the perfect mark in my trusting daughter. "What's our legal position if he continues to make a claim on the property?" I asked. David Chen gave a thin, cold smile. "Non-existent. He has no claim. The property belongs to Meridian, operated under a management contract with you. Even if he were legally married to your daughter, and even if you wanted to sign your management rights over to them, it would require the approval of this board, which he will never get," Eleanor Vance said firmly. "More importantly," Patricia Warren added, "his assault on you last night was witnessed by more than 200 people. We already have statements from 6 witnesses who have reached out to our legal team. Mr. Renteria has committed felony assault against an employee of Meridian in the performance of his duties." I blinked. "Felony? Assault on a person over the age of 65 is an automatic felony in the state of Texas," David Chen explained. "And since you were acting as our representative, it also counts as assault on a corporate officer. Mr. Renteria is facing serious prison time." My phone rang, cutting through the conversation. Alan's name flashed on the screen. Eleanor Vance gestured for me to answer it, while David Chen activated a recording app on his tablet. "Alan, Richard, thank God. Look, I've been thinking about last night, and I realize I owe you a huge apology. I was way out of line. The stress of the wedding, the champagne. You know how it is. Really. Come on, don't be like that. We're family now. Family forgives and moves on. I was thinking we should meet this morning. Work out the details of the property transfer. Get this ranch business settled so there are no more misunderstandings." I looked at Eleanor Vance, who nodded for me to continue. "Property transfer? Don't play dumb, Richard. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Avery is entitled to her inheritance, and frankly, after last night, it's clear you're not in a position to manage the ranch anymore. You lost your temper over a simple business discussion." The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to rewrite history, to paint me as the aggressor. "Really, Alan? You want to claim that I hit you? I'm trying to be diplomatic here. Look, we all saw what happened. You got agitated. You took a swing at me. You lost your balance and fell. It was embarrassing for everyone, especially Avery." Patricia Warren was scribbling furiously on a notepad, while David Chen made sure the recording was clear. "So you want me to sign the ranch over to you and Avery?" "It's the right thing to do, Richard. And honestly, it's what Avery wants. She's been telling me for months how worried she is about you, out there all alone, trying to manage everything. She'll be so much more relaxed knowing the property is in responsible hands." "Responsible hands, meaning yours. I know you don't like me, but I'm not going anywhere. Avery and I are married. I'm going to be a part of this family for the rest of your life. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." There it was, the threat, delivered with the calculated confidence that had fooled my daughter for 2 years. "And what's the hard way, Alan?" "The hard way is lawyers and doctors and competency hearings. The hard way is Avery having to make difficult decisions about her father's mental health. The hard way is all of us ending up embarrassed." Eleanor Vance's face hardened. She gestured for me to let him keep talking. "And if I sign it over, all of that goes away? All of it goes away. We have a nice family dinner. We put last night behind us and start fresh. I'm even willing to let you stay on as some kind of consultant. You could keep living in the house, help with the daily chores. Think of it as a comfortable retirement." The condescension was unbearable. He was offering to let me stay in my own home as his employee, managing the property he planned to steal. "I need to think about it. Don't take too long, Richard. I've got lawyers on standby, and Avery is getting more worried by the hour. She's been crying all night, asking if her dad is going crazy." He hung up before I could say anything. I put the phone down and looked at the faces around me. 5 of the most powerful people I had ever met, and every single one of them was furious. "Textbook elder abuse," Patricia Warren said. "Isolation, psychological manipulation, financial exploitation, and threats of institutionalization." "It's all right there. That recording is enough to bring criminal charges," David Chen added. "Extortion, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit abuse of an elderly person." Eleanor Vance stood up. "Mr. Valverde, I want you to call Mr. Renteria back. Tell him you've decided to agree to his terms, but you need to see him in person to sign the papers. Tell him to come to the ranch this afternoon. You want him to come here? Absolutely. We have some business to discuss with Mr. Renteria. It's time he found out exactly who he's been threatening. Thomas Davis checked his watch. I'll call our security team. They can be here in 2 hours. Security team? Robert gave a grim smile. Meridian protects its investments, Richard. And more importantly, we protect our people. Mr. Renteria assaulted one of our employees and attempted to defraud us of one of our properties. That warrants a response. I thought of Avery, probably alone in a hotel room right now, confused and heartbroken, believing her father was somehow responsible for the disaster of her wedding. I thought of all the lies Alan had told her, how he had twisted her love for me into doubt and worry. What about my daughter? She doesn't know any of this. She will, Eleanor Vance said firmly. After we're finished with Mr. Renteria, we will sit down with your daughter and explain everything. The truth about the ranch, the truth about her husband, and the truth about what he has been doing to you both. My phone buzzed with a text from Alan. Noon at the ranch. Bring the deed and any other paperwork. Time to make it official. I showed the message to Eleanor Vance. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Perfect. Mr. Renteria wants to make things official. We will be happy to accommodate him. Alan arrived at the ranch 15 minutes early, driving his leased BMW like he owned the place. I watched from the kitchen window as he parked by the porch, adjusting his tie and checking his reflection in the side mirror. He had no idea that 6 of the most powerful people in Texas were watching him from the barn, where they had set up with a direct line of sight to the house. Meridian's security team had arrived an hour earlier. 3 ex-federal agents who now handled sensitive situations for the consortium. They were positioned around the property, out of sight but ready. Eleanor Vance had been clear in her instructions. Observe, record, and only intervene if Alan becomes violent. Remember, she told me before taking her position in the barn, let him talk. Let him make his demands. Give him enough rope to hang himself legally. I opened the front door before Alan could knock. He strode in with his usual arrogance, carrying a leather portfolio, an expression of barely contained triumph on his face. Richard, he said, not bothering to shake my hand. I'm glad you came to your senses. This is what's best for everyone. Is it? Of course. Avery is so relieved that we're finally resolving this. She was so worried about you after last night. He placed his briefcase on the dining room table and opened it. I brought all the necessary documents. The property transfer, power of attorney, everything needed to make it official. I stared at the papers he was spreading across my grandmother's table. Legal documents he had clearly prepared weeks ago. This wasn't an impulsive decision born of wedding stress and champagne. This was a carefully planned operation. You've been planning this for a while. Alan looked up, startled. For a second, his mask slipped, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. Then he forced a smile. Well, I'm a businessman, Richard. I believe in being prepared. After I got engaged to Avery, I started thinking about family assets, estate planning, that sort of thing. I'm just trying to be responsible. I sat down across from him, aware of the small recording device David Chen had given me, tucked into my shirt pocket. Tell me about responsibility, Alan. Tell me about your responsibilities at your company. His hand froze over the papers. What? Your job, Alan. The one you're about to lose for embezzlement. The color drained from his face. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Corporate cards for personal expenses. Billing clients for work you never did. Your bosses are planning to fire you next week. They'll probably press charges, too. Alan's eyes darted to the windows, as if suddenly realizing we might not be alone. Who told you that? Does it matter? What matters is Avery doesn't know, does she? She doesn't know about the gambling debts, or the credit card bills, or the fact that you owe a lot of money to some very dangerous people. He stood up abruptly, scraping his chair on the wood floor. You've been investigating me. I've been protecting my daughter, the same daughter you have been systematically gaslighting for 2 years. Gaslighting? His voice rose in feigned outrage. I love Avery. Everything I've done has been for her, for our future. Everything you've done has been for you. You saw a single woman with a propertied father, and you saw an opportunity. Alan's composure completely crumbled. Propertied father? You think you're rich? This place is mortgaged to the hilt, Richard. I've seen the financials. You're barely breaking even on this cattle operation. The only real asset you have is the land itself. There it was. The confession that he had been digging into my finances, with the intent of liquidating everything I had built. Keeping my voice steady, I said. So, it's the land you want. I want security for my wife. Avery deserves better than to worry about whether her aging father can keep this place afloat. He leaned forward, his voice taking on that condescending tone I hated. Look, I know you're proud. I know this ranch means a lot to you. But you have to be realistic. You're 68 years old, you have no help, and this place is barely profitable. Sell it to a developer, invest the money, and everyone wins. Everyone wins? You get a secure retirement. Avery gets her inheritance while she's still young enough to enjoy it, and I get to take care of you both, like family should. Like family should? From the man who just admitted he wants to sell my grandfather's ranch to developers. What kind of developers did you have in mind? Alan's eyes lit up. He pulled out his phone and started swiping. I've had some preliminary talks. There's a firm out of Dallas that specializes in luxury residential communities. They're very interested in this area. He turned the phone towards me, showing architectural renderings of a gated community called Ranch View Estates. 200 homes, a golf course, and a shopping center, all built on what was once the Double C Ranch. They're offering $4.8 million for the full 800 acres, Alan continued. Can you imagine, Richard? $4.8 million. You would never have to worry about money again. I looked at the plans, feeling sick. You've already negotiated a price? Just preliminary talks. I told them I had to speak with the family first. But yes, they're very interested. They want to break ground in the spring. And you get a commission on this sale? Alan hesitated for just a second too long. Well, there would be a finder's fee, standard for a deal like this. How much? 2%. $200,000, he said quickly, as if the number was unimportant. But I'm not doing it for that, Richard. This is for the family. $200,000. More than enough to pay off his gambling and credit card debts, with plenty left over to start fresh somewhere else. Probably without Avery, once she had served her purpose. And what does Avery think about turning her childhood home into a subdivision? Avery wants what's best for you. She trusts me to handle the financial side of things. Because you convinced her I'm not capable. Alan's facade cracked for a moment, a flash of annoyance in his eyes. Because you're acting like you're not capable. This ranch is a sinking ship, and you're too stubborn to admit it. How long do you think you can keep this up? 5 more years? 10? What happens when you have a heart attack out here alone? Or fall off a horse and break a hip? He was working himself up now, believing his own excuses. Avery's going to inherit this place when you die anyway. I'm just making sure she inherits something of value, instead of a pile of debt and crumbling buildings. How thoughtful of you. It is. It's also realistic. But you can't see past your own pride to do what's right for your daughter. That's when I heard car doors slam outside. Alan heard it too and moved to the window. Who's that? He asked, his voice tense. I came to stand beside him. Eleanor Vance was walking towards the house, flanked by David Chen and Thomas Davis. Behind them were Robert and the other board members. The 6 of them wore expressions so cold they could have frozen water. Those are the people who actually own this ranch, I said quietly. Alan whipped around to face me. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I don't own the Double C Ranch, Alan. I never have. I'm the manager. I work for them. The portfolio slipped from Alan's hands, legal documents scattering across the floor. That's impossible. 25 years ago, I was on the verge of bankruptcy. These people bought the ranch and hired me to run it. Everything you've seen, everything you've planned for, everything you've threatened me for, none of it belongs to me. Alan's face cycled through a series of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally dawning horror. You're lying. I wish I were. But the people walking up to my door represent a consortium worth about $2 billion. They own ranches, farms, and agricultural land in 6 states. And you just spent the last year trying to con them. A sharp knock on the door came right on cue. I opened it to find Eleanor Vance and her team waiting on the porch. Mr. Valverde, she said formally, thank you for calling us. I believe there's someone in here who wants to discuss a property transaction. Alan was backing away towards the far wall, his eyes wide with panic. This is a setup. No, Alan, I said sadly. This is reality, the one you've been avoiding for a very long time. Eleanor Vance swept into the room, her presence immediately commanding. Mr. Renteria, I presume. I'm Eleanor Vance, chairwoman of the Meridian Investment Consortium. I understand you've been making inquiries about our property. Your property. The Double C Ranch, 800 acres of prime cattle country in the state of Texas, acquired by Meridian in 1998. Mr. Valverde is our ranch manager, and a very good one. David Chen opened his own briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. We have transcripts of your conversation from this morning, Mr. Renteria. Extortion, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit abuse of an elderly person. Quite an impressive list of felonies. Alan looked desperately around the room, as if searching for an escape. You can't prove anything. Thomas Davis held up a small digital recorder. Actually, we can. Every word. Recorded with Mr. Valverde's full cooperation. We also have witness statements from your wedding reception, Patricia Warren added, stepping inside with the others. Felony assault on a senior citizen in front of 200 witnesses. The DA is very interested in pressing charges. Alan's legs seemed to give out. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. This can't be happening. Oh, but it is, Eleanor Vance said coldly. You see, Mr. Renteria, at Meridian, we protect our investments, and more importantly, we protect our people. Mr. Valverde has been with us for 25 years. You threaten him. You threaten all of us. What do you want? Alan's voice was barely a whisper. We want you to disappear, she said flatly, permanently. From Mr. Valverde's life, from this property, and if you have any sense, from the state of Texas. David Chen placed a document on the table. This is a restraining order, effective immediately. You are forbidden from having any contact with Mr. Valverde, his daughter, or anyone associated with this property. Violate it, and you will be arrested on the spot. You can't do this. Avery is my wife. Actually, Patricia Warren said, checking her tablet, that marriage may not be valid. Our background check turned up some interesting information about your past. Evidence suggests you were never legally divorced from your first wife. Alan's face went white. That's impossible. Oh, it's possible. We'll let the authorities sort it out. In the meantime, you have exactly 1 hour to collect your things and leave the state. Eleanor Vance leaned in, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Mr. Renteria, you are a pathetic little man who preys on vulnerable women. You are exactly the kind of predator we have spent 25 years keeping off properties like this one. She straightened up, her voice firm again. You will not contact Avery again. You will not attempt to claim any property or assets. You will disappear quietly, or we will destroy you. Is that clear? Alan nodded desperately, then looked at me, his eyes pleading. Richard, please. I made mistakes, but I really do love Avery. I stared back at him. If you loved my daughter, you never would have tried to steal her heritage. You never would have lied to her about me. And you certainly never would have hit me at her wedding. The security team appeared in the doorway, 3 large men who made the room feel smaller. Time to go, Mr. Renteria, one of them said politely. Alan gathered his scattered papers with trembling hands, stuffed them into his portfolio, and walked to the door. At the threshold, he turned one last time. This isn't over. Eleanor Vance smiled, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in it. Mr. Renteria, it is absolutely over. The silence after he was gone was absolute. I stood on the porch and watched the dust from his BMW settle on the ranch road, knowing I would never see him again. The members of the Meridian board were in my living room, quietly packing their documents, preparing for what I knew would be the hardest conversation of my life. Mr. Valverde, Eleanor Vance said gently, we need to talk about your daughter, Avery. Sweet, trusting Avery, who was probably sitting in a hotel room right now, wondering why her wedding ended in disaster and why her new husband had suddenly disappeared. She had no idea her marriage was likely a sham, that Alan had been planning to steal her inheritance, that everything she believed about her family was built on a 5-year-old lie. She's going to hate me, I said quietly. Robert shook his head. She's going to be hurt and confused, but she's also going to be relieved when she understands what Alan was really planning. David Chen looked up from his tablet. We've found her. She's at the Four Seasons downtown. Our investigators spoke with hotel staff. She's been in her room since last night, not taking calls from anyone but Alan, who stopped calling an hour ago, Patricia Warren added pointedly. Eleanor Vance made a decision. We will go to her, together. All of us. She needs to hear the truth from you, but she also needs to understand the full picture. An hour later, we were sitting in a private conference room at the hotel. Avery arrived looking exhausted and lost, still wearing her wedding dress from the day before, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me with 6 strangers in business suits, her confusion deepened. Dad, what's going on? Where's Alan? He was supposed to meet me here hours ago, but he's not answering his phone. I guided her to a chair, my heart breaking at the trust, still shining in her eyes. "Honey, we need to talk. There are some things you need to know." "Is this about last night? About what happened at the reception?" She looked around the room nervously. "Dad, I know Alan shouldn't have done it. I know he lost his temper, but you were being so stubborn about the ranch, and he's been under so much pressure. Avery." My voice was firmer than I intended. "Alan hit me. He assaulted me in front of 200 people because I refused to give him something that was never mine to give." "Never yours to give? Dad, what are you talking about?" Eleanor Vance leaned forward. "Miss Renteria." "Valverde," Avery corrected automatically. "I'm keeping my name. Miss Valverde, I am Eleanor Vance. I represent the Meridian Investment Consortium. We are the owners of the Double C Ranch." The words hung in the air. Avery blinked several times, as if she'd misheard. "You're the owners? That's not possible. The ranch has been in our family for generations." "It was in your family," Robert explained gently, "until 25 years ago, when your father was facing bankruptcy from your mother's medical bills. Meridian purchased the property and hired your father as the ranch manager." I watched my daughter's face as the implications began to sink in. "Ranch manager? I'm an employee, honey. A well-paid and well-treated employee, but an employee. I never owned the land. I never had the right to sign it over to you, or to anyone else." Avery's breathing grew shallow. But you always talked about it being my inheritance. You always said the ranch would be mine someday." "And it can be," Eleanor Vance said. "Meridian has always been willing to sell the property back to the Valverde family, should they ever have the means to purchase it. And how much would that be?" David Chen consulted his tablet. "The current market value is approximately $4.2 million. The number hit Avery like a physical blow. She slumped back in her chair, her eyes unfocused. $4.2 million, she repeated. Alan thought he was marrying an heiress," Thomas Davis said bluntly. "He spent 2 years planning to get his hands on what he thought was your inheritance." Patricia Warren opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Miss Valverde, you need to understand who you married. Alan Renteria is a con artist with a pattern of targeting women with assets. For the next 30 minutes, they laid it all out for her. Alan's debts, his job troubles, his history of financial fraud. They showed her recorded calls, evidence of his gaslighting, and documents proving he was planning to sell the ranch to developers. But the worst part came last. There is also evidence that your marriage may not be legal," David Chen said carefully. "It appears Alan was never properly divorced from his first wife." Avery made a small, wounded sound. "He's married to someone else?" "He was. The first wife has been missing for 3 years. The investigation is still open." My daughter folded in on herself as if she'd been struck. I reached for her, but she pulled away. "No," she whispered. "Just no." We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, you could hear the city traffic, life going on as my daughter's world fell apart in a hotel conference room. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes filled with pain. "Did you know? About Alan, I mean. Did you know what he was doing?" I suspected. I tried to look into it, but I didn't have proof until recently. "Why didn't you tell me?" It was the question I had dreaded. Because I was hoping you would see who he was for yourself. Because I didn't want to be the father who ruins his daughter's happiness based on a suspicion. And because you were afraid I wouldn't believe you," she said, her voice quiet. I nodded. "He was very good at making me seem like the problem, at making you doubt my judgment, my sanity." Avery was quiet for a long time, processing everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but distant. "I need time. I need to think about all this." Eleanor Vance stood. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Mr. Valverde's position at the ranch is secure for as long as he wants it. And should you ever decide to discuss purchasing the property, our door will always be open to the Valverde family." After they left, Avery and I were alone in the conference room. The silence between us was thick with 25 years of secrets and 2 years of manipulation. "I feel so stupid," she finally said. "You're not stupid. You're trusting. There's a difference." "Is there?" "I let a stranger convince me my own father was losing his mind. I believed Alan when he told me you were getting forgetful, unstable. I even started looking into nursing homes, Dad. I was going to have you declared legally incompetent." That confession hurt more than Alan's slap. "Honey, no. Let me finish. I let him poison my relationship with you. I let him plant doubts about everything I knew about the man who raised me, who worked his fingers to the bone to give me a good life after Mom died. The tears were flowing freely now. And for what? For a man who only saw me as a meal ticket." I took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Alan was a professional. He knew exactly how to play both of us. But I should have known. I should have trusted you. We held hands while she cried, both of us grieving for different things. She was grieving a broken marriage, a shattered trust, a betrayed judgment. I was grieving the relationship we had lost to Alan's lies, and the innocence she would never get back. 3 months later, Avery came back to the ranch. Not for good, but for a long stay while she sorted out the legal mess of her invalid marriage and put her life back together. The annulment was surprisingly easy once Alan's bigamy was confirmed. He never contested a thing, probably because he was too busy dodging creditors and the law. We never heard from him again. The last Meridian's investigators heard, he was in Mexico, trying to start over with a fake identity. I hoped he had learned something, but I doubted it. Men like Alan Renteria rarely change. The ranch felt different with Avery there. She threw herself into the work with the intensity of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. She learned to mend fences, helped with cattle vaccinations, and took over the bookkeeping with an efficiency that even impressed Eleanor Vance during her quarterly visits. "Your daughter has a real head for business," Eleanor told me one afternoon, as we watched Avery negotiate with a cattle buyer. "If she ever wants to make an offer on this place, I think the board would be very willing to listen." But money wasn't the issue anymore. Avery's trust fund from her mother's life insurance, combined with her own savings and earning potential, was more than enough for a down payment. The real question was whether she wanted to be tied to this place, to this life, after everything that had happened. The answer came on a quiet Sunday evening in December. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, when she finally brought it up. "I want to buy the ranch," she said, just like that. "Are you sure? You don't have to feel obligated." "I'm not. I'm doing this because this is my home. Because this is where Mom and I picked wildflowers every spring. Because this is where I learned to ride a horse with you. Because this is where I learned what real love is." She paused, her voice softening. "Alan made me forget who I was, where I came from. He made me ashamed of this place, of our simple life. But there's nothing simple about what you've built here, Dad. And there's nothing shameful about honest work and taking care of the land." 6 months later, the sale was complete. Avery Valverde was officially the owner of the Double C Ranch, with a mortgage she could comfortably afford and a father who stayed on as ranch manager. "Though now," I answered to her, "not Meridian." Eleanor Vance came to the closing, bringing champagne and an unexpected gift. 25 years ago, Meridian bought this ranch to preserve it, she said, raising her glass. Today, we return it to the family that loves it most. This is exactly what we hoped for when we first met your father. Watching Avery sign the papers that made her the owner, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt since Mariana died. My daughter was home, she was safe, and she was in control of her own destiny. Alan Renteria was a bad memory, fading a little more each day. That night, as we walked a fence line together, checking for damage from a recent storm, Avery asked the question I had been waiting for. "Do you ever regret it? Hiding the truth about Meridian from me for so long?" I took a moment before answering. "I regret that it made you vulnerable to Alan's manipulation. I regret that it complicated your feelings about the ranch. But I don't regret protecting you from financial worries when you were a child. And I don't regret working with people who valued preserving this land over making a quick profit." She nodded, then surprised me. "I've been thinking about Mom lately, about what she would say about all of this. What do you think she'd say?" Avery smiled, a look of genuine happiness I hadn't seen in months. "I think she'd say that family protects each other no matter what, and that a home isn't defined by who holds the deed but by who belongs there." As we walked back to the house, I realized that Alan Renteria had, in his own twisted way, given us a gift. By trying to tear us apart, he forced us to rebuild on a foundation of truth, instead of secrets. We were stronger now, more honest with each other, more aware of what we had. The lights of the ranch house glowed warm and welcoming as we approached. In the distance, the cattle were settling down for the night, and the land stretched out around us, familiar and comforting, ours again, in the only way that ever truly mattered. I was finally free from the weight of my secrets, and my daughter was finally free from the influence of a man who never deserved her trust. It wasn't the ending we had planned, but it was the one we needed. Sometimes, the best revenge is just outliving the people who try to break you. Sometimes, the greatest victory is making peace with the truth, no matter how complicated it is. Now I'm curious about you, listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Has anything like this ever happened to you? Comment below. And in the meantime, I'll leave 2 of my other favorite stories from the channel on the final screen. I'm sure they'll surprise you. Thanks for watching until the end.